Why does Keir Starmer need a deal with France? That question, on the surface, may seem like a matter of policy, of diplomacy, of two neighboring nations finding common ground. But dig deeper, and you will discover that this is not about cooperation. This is not about partnership. This is about survival, political survival. Because Keir Starmer's desperate need for a deal with France is not just the story of a leader seeking to solve a problem. It is the story of a man trapped by his own weakness, cornered by his own contradictions, and running out of time to convince the British public that he stands for something more than empty platitudes and cautious half-measures. The British public is angry. The British public is tired. Tired of boats crossing the channel every day, of news stories about overwhelmed border controls, of a government that seems unable or unwilling to do what it takes to regain control of Britain's borders. That anger has been building for years, but now it burns hotter than ever. And Keir Starmer knows it. He can feel it every time he steps into a television studio, every time he faces the cameras, every time he's pressed on what his party would do differently. And every time, his answer is the same: a vague promise of competence, of pragmatism, of working with our partners in Europe. But what does that mean? It means France. It means throwing himself at the mercy of Emmanuel Macron. It means going, cap in hand, to Paris to beg for a deal that will do what he cannot bring himself to say plainly: stop the boats. Because Starmer cannot, or will not, take the decisive, bold action demanded by the crisis. Because Starmer is terrified of offending the very people whose support he courts, the polite middle-class liberals who tut at hard borders and frown at nationalism, even as they quietly worry about who moves in next door. And so he tells himself, and he tells us, that the answer is diplomacy. That Britain's shame is not the porous border itself, but the tone of those who dare to point it out. He does not speak of sovereignty, of national will, or of the simple, undeniable right of a country to decide who comes in and who does not. Instead, he speaks of process, of joint operations, of shared responsibility. The language of a man who would rather negotiate Britain's decline than fight for Britain's future. But make no mistake, this is not diplomacy from a position of strength. This is supplication, because France does not need Britain nearly as much as Britain needs France. Macron has made that clear time and time again, delighting in reminding London of its post-Brexit isolation, its diminished clout on the continent. To Paris, Britain's migrant crisis is not a crisis at all. It is Britain's problem, to be dealt with on Britain's shores. And yet here is Keir Starmer, convinced that if he just shows the right attitude, if he just speaks the right words, if he just proves he is not like those brutish Tories before him, then France will play ball. It is pathetic. It is humiliating. And it reveals everything you need to know about the kind of leader Keir Starmer really is. Because here is the truth. Starmer does not want to deal with France because it is the only solution. He wants a deal with France because it is the only solution he is willing to contemplate. He will not confront the human rights lawyers who tie the government's hands in court. He will not stand up to the NGOs who ferry migrants across the channel in the name of compassion. He will not challenge the bureaucrats in Brussels or the judges in Strasbourg who treat Britain's borders as a suggestion rather than a line in the sand. And so he runs to France, hoping they will clean up the mess for him, hoping they will do his dirty work so he can keep his hands clean and his conscience clear. But this is not just about immigration. This is about power, about sovereignty, about whether Britain will continue to allow its destiny to be dictated by others, or whether it will finally take back control of its own affairs. Starmer's approach tells you everything you need to know about where he stands on that question. He does not trust the British people to decide. He does not trust Britain to stand on its own 2 feet. He believes that our future, our security, our borders must be negotiated, and that it is better to appease Paris than to assert London. And so he cloaks his cowardice in the language of diplomacy. He calls it pragmatism. He calls it grown-up politics. But the British people are not fools. They know what weakness looks like. They know what it means when a leader talks about compromise, when he talks about shared responsibility, and when he refuses to say the word stop. It means surrender. Starmer's need for a deal with France is the inevitable result of everything he is and everything he is not. He is not bold. He is not decisive. He is not willing to fight for the hard choices that leadership demands. He is a man of caution, of calculation, of endless triangulation, and he has spent his entire career trying to please everyone and offend no one. But in the end, leadership is about choosing. And Starmer cannot choose that so he punts the choice to Paris. And in doing so, he reveals the hollowness at the heart of his politics, because there is nothing inevitable about the Channel crisis. Britain has the means to defend its own borders. Britain has the right to say who comes and who does not. But that requires the courage to defy the voices who will call you cruel. That requires the strength to stand up to the institutions that have turned migration into a business. That requires the will to put Britain first and take the heat that comes with it. Keir Starmer will never do that he cannot. And so he needs France. Not because France has the answer, but because he does not. And so Britain waits. It waits as its coasts are breached, as its resources are stretched, and as its people are told yet again to accept decline as their lot. It waits for a leader who will put its interests first, not his own image. It waits for a leader who will understand that sovereignty is not something you negotiate away. It is something you defend. Keir Starmer's need for a deal with France is more than a diplomatic strategy. It is a confession that he does not believe Britain can, or even should, stand on its own. A confession that he is more comfortable asking for help than demanding respect. And it is a warning. A warning that if this is what leadership looks like before he even takes office, then what will it look like when he sits in number 10? Because the test of a leader is not how he talks when times are easy. It is how he acts when the choice is hard, when the stakes are high, and when the world is watching. And Keir Starmer has already shown us who he is, a man who will not fight for Britain, a man who will not lead Britain, a man who will instead look across the channel and hope someone else will solve the problems he is too timid to face. That is why Keir Starmer needs a deal with France. And that is why Britain needs something more, something better, something braver, because this country deserves a leader who believes in it as much as its people still do. And Keir Starmer has proven, time and again, that he does not.